Wakati Gachagua aliongea ukweli. Bana Rais, sikiza sisi vizuri sana. Gachagua alisema ukweli. Watu ya Jubaland Malaysians wako Mandera, wako BB1, watu wamekufa kweli yake.
Is overpowered, they relocate to Mandera town. As we have been saying for the last couple of days, the Jubaland forces have been pushed out of Bulhawa, that is the Somalia town, and they are operating from the Mandera side.
The Mandera crisis takeover. As of today, it has escalated to new levels as the Jubaland forces takes control of the whole of Mandera County. Now the question that many Kenyans are asking themselves is, what does this mean for Kenya as a country, and what does this mean for the sovereignty of our republic? The silence of the Kenyan security agencies speaks in so much volumes. The second question is, what does this mean for Kenya as the President of the Republic of Kenya, William Ruto, has failed to sanction a military operation in Mandera to kick out the foreign forces and free the citizens of the Republic of Kenya from the hands of the foreign military force, the Jubaland forces? That is the second question. First, allow me to look at a message that was recently relayed by the former Cabinet Secretary of Trade under William Ruto's government, Moses Kuria, about the Mandera invasion. Kuria said this: "Not since the Shifta War has Kenya's territorial integrity been so violated, like the current Jubaland invasion of Mandera. Our nation watches in silence and despair. Mandera governor alone, wolf in the desert. Imagine if it was, God forbid, Nairobi invaded by Uganda. Good old Jomo must be turning in his grave. I stand with the people of Mandera. This abdication and conspiracy of silence is appalling." That is what Kuria said. And we all can stand up and say that the silence of the President of the Republic of Kenya speaks in so much volume. Now going forward, allow me to take you back 3 months ago. On May 29th, 2025, the President of Kenya, President William Ruto, welcomed the Somaliland President Abdirahman Mohamed Abdullahi, where Ruto recognized Somaliland as an independent country, allowing it to set its embassy in Nairobi. Should I remind you that the Jubaland forces, most of them hail from Somaliland. Now, before the arrival of the Somaliland president in Kenya, on May, 2 months earlier, less than 2 weeks after President William Ruto had completed his northeastern tour, the Jubaland struck at the heart of Mandera for the first time, killing 6 police officers at a police camp in Mandera. Though the government tried to spin the narrative and blame the attack on Al-Shabaab, that was the first stamp that the Jubaland forces made in Mandera, testing the waters for their big plan, which was to capture Mandera and turn it into a town or a territory of the Jubaland forces. After the Kenyan government failed to sanction a retaliatory military operation after the Jubaland attack, which killed 6 police officers, the Jubaland forces now saw this as a green light to initiate the plan to take over Mandera. Now the question that many of you might be asking,
arrintan gaar ahaan kooxda doonaysa in gobolka dib loogu celiyo gacanta Jubaland si la mid ah sida ay waqtiga jamhadaha Soomaalidu garab uga heli jireen kooxda TPLF ee Tigreega ee xukunka Itoobiya gacanta ku haysay hadda meesha laga saaray. Isku day
police officers. President William Ruto had visited Mandera, and there he made the biggest mistake of his political career, waving away the ID vetting process for Somali migrants at the Mandera border. Remember, this was a mistake, but ask me why. The ID vetting process for Somali immigrants along the borders of Kenya, in the towns of northeastern Kenya, has been there for decades. Now the president saw it fit to wave these processes away, which was his bigger plan to smuggle in voters from Somalia and Somaliland to vote him in 2027. And that's the reason he never ordered the KDF to retaliate after the attack by the foreign forces of Jubaland, as is required of him by the Constitution of Kenya. A military operation would have jeopardized his massive plan for mass ID and voter registration for Somalian immigrants who were flooding Mandera from the porous borders of Mandera and of Kenya and Somalia. Now the Jubaland forces, realizing that a rare window had opened, they flooded Mandera and started strategizing for a military takeover of the county, which, as of right now, we can say they have succeeded about 80 to 90%. Most of you might argue that President William Ruto didn't have the knowledge or the know-how of the Jubaland or foreign military takeover within the Kenyan borders. But allow me, as a consumer of intelligence, to remind you that Kenya is one of the most resourceful intelligence bodies in Africa, the NIS, the National Intelligence Service, which receives a budget of over 60 billion per year to fund its operation and also to pay for intel collection all over the country and outside the borders of the country. So which tells you what? According to the law, according to the resources at the disposal of the NIS, they had the intel that Jubaland forces were invading Mandera. And as required, the National Intelligence, according to the law, the National Intelligence Service Director, as of now, Nudin Haji, is supposed to brief the president every morning of security matters in the country. And this should not have slipped his mind on briefing the president of a possible invasion by a foreign military group, the Jubaland forces. And if the president, it is clear, if Nudin Haji assumed this, the blame should be on him. But according to the law and the layout of the operations of the National Intelligence Service, the Director of National Intelligence Service should have relayed this information to the president. Now, if the president received the intel on the Jubaland forces takeover in Mandera, he was supposed to convene a Security Council meeting, which comprised of all the security principals in the country, the 8 of them: the president, the deputy president, the CDF, Chief of Defense Forces, Charles KAHARIRI, then the defense minister, right now Soipani Tuya, the Interior Cabinet Secretary, that is Kipchumba Murkomen, and last on the list is none other than the IG of Police, Douglas Kanja. That is the Security Council, which the president should have sanctioned or should have convened after receiving the intel on the invasion of Mandera, by a foreign military operation. But receiving the intel, Ruto never acted on it. The Mandera governor tried to hide the truth, hoping that Ruto would order an operation against the Jubaland forces. But after realizing that was never going to happen, he called a press briefing to call for the help from the president, who until now has remained numb and undermined to the cries of the people of Mandera, including the Mandera governor. But why is Ruto quiet? It's because after allowing the Somaliland president to set an embassy in Kenya, many Somaliland immigrants are gaining access to Kenya through the Mandera border, where they are registered as voters, as the plan was hatched before by President William Ruto held the CS Aden Duale. Now, remember, this is not the first time the Kenyan forces have backed an operation led by the Jubaland forces. Allow me to take you back at least in history so that you will understand what I mean, that this is not the first operation that has been carried out backed by the KDF, led by the Jubaland forces. Now, according to a dossier that was leaked back in the year 2021, it is said that the Kenyan-backed Jubaland forces attempt to invade Somali town, which is a town located in Somaliland. This invasion led to at least 20 soldiers killed on both sides. 14 civilians were killed, including some police chiefs from Somali. My dear brethren, I tell you, it's high time that you realize the integrity of the Republic of Kenya is in jeopardy. And President William Ruto will do everything in his power to ensure that he maintains his presidency, not the integrity of the Republic of Kenya. According to the Constitution of Kenya, this is the weakest regime that we have had, where a regime is being invaded by foreign military forces, and yet the president remains undermined and does not sanction a military operation. Should I remind you that back in the days, Moi had to act upon the invasion of when the Ugandan forces invaded the Lake Victoria. Do I have to remind you of that? But the question is, why is Ruto so quiet? What does Ruto benefit from this? Now you know. Leave a comment on the comment section. See you in our next video. This is the Kenyan Daily Report. Subscribe.